E, Sewer Authority Midcoastside, Sam, will be holding this board meeting by Zoom. Access to this meeting is available to the board and public, by the computer web link or telephone audio. So could we have a roll call, please?
Director Dye.
Aye. Here.
Lohman. Director Lohman.
Here. I'm sorry, I got confused by Barbara there.
Sorry.
She started it. Director Clark.
Present.
Director Radbach. Here. Director Slater Carter.
I am present.
Chair Ruddock.
Here.
Chair Ruddock, before we start the meeting, I'd like to introduce Ty Fan, who is substituting for Jeremy. Jeremy's on vacation, so she's from the same firm, and she'll be in this meeting as a general counsel.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Hello.
And that is that's who is it? What's her name? Ty Fan. Hello, Ty.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Okay, so moving on to public comment. This is a chance to comment on items on the consent agenda and items that are not on the regular meeting agenda. I see one hand raised. Greg Gibbs.
Hi, I wanted to mention two things. One is that I'm conducting an analysis of fiscal sustainability for public works. I published a paper on it, sent it to the American Water Works Association after discussing it with a couple of members of the Rates and Charges Committee. I don't know if it'll get published there, but I published it in Coastside Buzz. And I'm gathering data for public works agencies in the county. I've sent each of the organizations a copy of the data that I've collected to make sure that I got the data right. What will be involved on top of collecting your data is allocating SAM to the member agencies, just like I do for Silicon Valley Clean Water and other JPAs. So I just wanted to make you aware I will be coming out with an analysis of the fiscal sustainability of all the public works parts of cities and independent agencies shortly. Separately, Debbie, you may remember you asked me to speak to John Dowdy a while ago about the unexplained excess inflows we had in December. John and I have met, we've traded emails, and he had, I think her name is Vivian Housen, consultant that John uses, do a model. The model showed that Half Moon Bay could be responsible for something like 7.5 million gallons a day peak flow. And the reason that's an issue is it leaves unexplained a variance of about 3.5 million gallons a day of peak flow that did occur at the plant. I mean, there's no doubt that the plant got to over 15 million gallons a day peak flow rate. So John volunteered to have me meet with Vivian and go over a model. And I've got 50 years of simulation experience, but I'm not a sewer guy or a professional engineer. So I don't want to waste anybody's time or money. I think it might make more sense to have Vivian and John present their model to the general manager of SAM or possibly the board to see what kind of expertise the people who are more familiar with sewer could bring to it. Because we've got to get to the bottom of this excess flow. There's I&I somewhere, and we've got to find out where it is.
Well, I wouldn't just focus on Half Moon Bay. I think you need to. You need to inquire of all three districts.
I'm sorry, I still didn't hear her.
She said you need to inquire of each of the three member agencies.
$120 to fill.
Okay. All right. Fine. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg.
At this point.
Let's see.
They publicize all the
Rick, you have your hand raised,
Yes, I do.
and Tim as well.
Yes, I do.
Because of the back, you should. There's a lot of respond very briefly.
Well, see, that's kind of perfect. Yeah.
I hear talking in the background.
Yes, so whoever is not muted, please mute yourself. Angelo, you're not muted. Matthew, you're not muted.
There we go. This is a parallel sports announcement. The Warriors are playing tonight, and I will be very unhappy if anybody is watching that during this thing and start screaming, "Go Warriors," or revealing what the score is because I'm taping it, and that's a threat.
We don't want any spoilers. Yes.
Nope.
No. Okay. Tim, you have your hand raised as well.
Yeah, I do. I just wanted to say that the goats are on the property out in front of Sam. It's how we do our weed abatement every year from the property, from the front of the Sam office building down to the frontage road. And they will be there for approximately the next week, and then they'll move over to the city side of the road. So I just want to let everyone know if they want to come down and see the goats, they are down at the property now.
Goats rule. Thanks, Tim. I don't see any other hands raised. So unless someone wants to pull an item off the consent agenda, could I have a motion and a second to approve? Barbara?
I would like to make a comment on the consent agenda. I don't need to pull it, but I would like to make a comment. Can I do that?
Yes.
So I requested changes to the minutes. I was sent an email with a copy of revised minutes with the message that my changes had been made. So I looked at the minutes and my changes had not been made. So I responded, my changes were not made. To which I was told, oh, it doesn't matter. What we said means the same thing. To which I said, well, then why don't you use my changes? And then we got into a whole justification of why this other wording was better. I don't want to get into a big fight about this, but I also think that when something is sent to me that says we have made your changes, then they should have made my changes rather than send me something different. So I just want to make that comment, and I am not going to pull anything, and I will support these minutes.
Knowledge. Is that the same thing as a motion to approve?
No, I'm not going to be the one to make the motion.
Okay. Would someone like to?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, could we have a roll call, please?
Director Bag,
Aye.
Director Lohman,
Yes.
Director Clark,
Nay.
Director Radback,
Yes.
Director Slater Carter,
Yes.
Chair Rana.
Yes. And we're still hearing background noise. I don't see who it is. Susie is unmuted. Rick is unmuted. Matthew's unmuted. So if you're not talking, mute yourself. Catherine is muted.
Oops. I think I said aye, but in case I didn't, formal record, I'm saying aye, and now I'm muting.
Yeah, we're just trying to make sure that we don't have any background noise because people remain unmuted. So thank you for that. Okay, we're moving on to item 4, which is regular business. The first item is report on wastewater sampling and COVID.
Yes, on the wastewater, sorry, am I muted? No. Okay, on the wastewater sampling and COVID, we've got Brad White from Verily, and we've entered into a contract with Verily for doing the wastewater testing for COVID. It's pretty much 3 times a week samples are being drawn from the wastewater and sent over to their labs. And we have a small presentation from Bradley. So Brad, I've given you control to share your screen. Go ahead, please.
Oh, sure. Hold on a second. I got to actually find it and then present it. I thought you guys were going to project it in a sec. Sorry about that. Hey, Allie, you're on, huh? Do you happen to have the presentation handy?
Yep, give me 1 sec. I have it.
So it's quite long, so I'm not going to go through every slide. I'm just going to go quick and give you an overview of what we're trying to do. And if there are any questions, I can slow down or, yeah, stop.
Brad, would you like me to present or to just send you the?
Oh, just present if you can.
Yep. Great. Can everyone see my screen?
Looks good to me.
Yeah, but maybe you should switch over to the slideshow range.
Yep, just wanted to make sure everyone could see it first. Yep, thank you.
That's good enough.
Great. Yeah, so we can jump right in. If you want to go to the next slide. Yeah, so for the last couple of years, we've been, and I may be talking many slides ahead, so just bear with me. We've been collaborating with Stanford to test the levels of SARS-CoV-2 in wastewater from plants in Northern California, specifically up and down the peninsula and in San Francisco. We've shown that there's a really nice correlation between the number of cases in a sewer shed and the levels of SARS-CoV-2 RNA we find in wastewater samples from treatment plants like yours. Stanford has gotten funding to now expand this program nationally, not just in Northern California. And as part of that, although Half Moon Bay is in Northern California, but as part of that, we were able to offer your plant enrollment into the program. And yeah, so that's kind of the background of it. I think the reason why testing wastewater is important is pretty obvious. So it gives you a really unbiased sample of how many people in a sewer shed might have a particular virus. SARS-CoV-2 is actually pretty unique. You actually get a lot of individual clinical testing with that. For most viruses, you get very little to no clinical testing. So it gives epidemiologists and public health officials and doctors insights into what's happening in communities that they otherwise would not have any access to. So we can go ahead to the next slide. One of the other kind of interesting things, so yeah, this one's good. So another interesting thing is that the results that we get from wastewater tend to actually get to public health officials before clinical testing gets to health officials, because people, as soon as they actually have the virus, start shedding it in their feces and urine. Whereas and it might even happen before they're symptomatic, whereas in order to get a clinical test and to get that positive test result to public health officials and aggregate that data, it might be, say they get symptomatic 2 days after they actually caught the virus, then they have to schedule a test. That's another 2 days. And it takes a day or so to run that test, and then like a day or so to actually send that data up to public health officials. It could be maybe a week at a time. 1 sec while I cough. All right, all good. So we get the data to public health officials before they might be able to get it from clinical testing. And this is just a graph showing in all these Northern California sewer sheds what values we've gotten from wastewater. So that's going to be your top panel there. It's going to be, it's like Davis, Gilroy, Oceanside, which is Western San Francisco, Palo Alto, Sacramento, San Jose, Sunnyvale, and Silicon Valley Treatment Center, which is in I think it's in Redwood City, Foster City area. And that's the copies per gram of solid waste of SARS-CoV-2 RNA. And then down below, and that's the top one. And then the middle one is normalized with another virus, a plant virus that's super common in that we eat it through tomatoes, peppers, and other things. And then the bottom is the actual incidence rate in these communities. You can see there's a really nice correlation between the incidence rates in these communities. And this is from this is not from this year. This is actually from December 2020 to April 2021, but the data has continued to show super nice correlations with clinical cases, and has become really a trusted piece of public health data, particularly for officials in Santa Clara County that we've been working with for a long time on this. go ahead and go to the next one. Yeah, so I think you guys are already enrolled in sending samples. So I'm not sure whether you're sending samples from the primary clarifier, from influent, but we take either. One of the kind of interesting things that we do that a lot of the other testing programs don't do is that we actually use the solid part of wastewater to do the testing, whereas most places will do the influent, the liquid portion of it. And so what we found is that there's about 100 to 1,000 times more virus per gram in the solids than the liquids. So it allows us to be quite a bit more sensitive in detecting different viruses when they're at very low levels within a community. Yeah, go skip past this one. Yeah, so like I said, that's Allie Bohm on the left, who's a professor at Stanford. She started all this up. She was doing it at a very small scale in her lab, maybe testing, I think, wastewater from just San Jose, no other treatment plants. And we have a pretty big lab and a lot of expertise in this. So we started doing daily testing from all these plants in Northern California that we previously listed, and more recently have begun to expand to the goal is to get to 300 plants, and that would be capturing, try to focus on ones that have more than 50,000 people in their sewer shed, and that would get us to around 40% of the US population that we'll be monitoring if we were able to enroll the 300 biggest plants. So we're really like the lab arm, and she's sort of the scientific director of the program. I think we went through this, so we don't need to do that. Yeah, keep going. Just so quickly run through this, like I said. So we either take influent from an auto sampler, we spin it down really fast, centrifuge it, and we get enough solid to do testing with this. The amount of solid we actually need to do this is super small, like maybe the size of a pea. Like it's a very, very small amount of solid, and it's kind of remarkable that it actually works as well as it does, but really is a great predictor of how many people in a community have a virus, be it SARS-CoV-2, influenza, or some of these other ones. This is just a little bit of the process. So if we get sludge from a primary clarifier, it normally comes in quite dark, as I'm sure you all know. If we get influent, it comes in a little bit lighter. Either way, we centrifuge them. We get a solid pellet there in the side of that tube, and then we take all of the water out that we can, and then start putting it through the steps. So the main step is that we add a reagent that frees the virus from all the solids. It also breaks the virus into little pieces, so it's no longer potentially infectious, and so freeze that RNA, and then we use a process to get rid of the vast majority of other contaminants or inhibitors that are present within wastewater. Then we use a process, which I won't go into details unless someone really wants to know, called digital droplet PCR. It's a way to quantify the number of viral RNA molecules within a solution, and it is quite sensitive and quite good at doing this particular quantification. A lot of other programs use different method called just RT-PCR or qPCR, which isn't quite as sensitive as this droplet PCR that we use. And that's one of the things we kind of like about our particular approach. And you'll see what you do is you end up dividing the sample into many tens of thousands of droplets. And then in every single droplet, you're doing an amplification reaction to see whether there is any virus present in that particular droplet. And then you can kind of see if the droplet fluoresces, which you see you have different populations on this screen, that means that the virus was present in that droplet. And these are just different targets within the virus, ORF, which is open reading frame, the nucleocapsid gene, or the spike gene. Yeah, so there's the data now lives kind of in two places. Most of the Northern California sites live in this original website that was built by Stanford called wbe.stanford.edu. And here's, this one's cut off a little earlier than present, but you see the winter surge of COVID back in 2020. And then we had a nice lull there where we all thought this might go away and it might not be a big problem again. Then Delta came and we had that surge, and then we're all thinking, okay, well, Delta's pretty bad, so that might be the end of it. But then Omicron came and we had this huge surge. And the data, we might have the data on the other slide. Since the original Omicron surge, keep going. Yeah, it might not be here, but since the original Omicron surge, actually a different variant of Omicron called BA.2 has come through and has actually exceeded that original Omicron surge there in early 2022. So particularly in San Francisco and some of the Northern California plants, we've seen the highest readings we've ever seen here in like May. They're starting to tail off a little, thankfully, but here in kind of mid to late May, we've seen the highest readings we've ever seen there, even more than this original surge driven by this BA.2 variant of Omicron. So we test for all these different variants at the same time as we're testing for the overall level of SARS-CoV-2 here. Go ahead to the next one. And so then we also have this other website, publichealth.verily.com, which is where those core like 10 sites that I was talking about are on the Stanford website. And then we're now listing all of the, we're graphing all of the news sites on this dashboard. So this is Los Angeles. This is our biggest wastewater treatment plant. I think they have somewhere on the order of 4 million people contributing to that in that sewer shed. So this is just showing, January there, the blue line is all SARS-CoV-2. The y-axis there is the copies of virus per dry gram of solid waste. So you see it's quite high in January. So that was at kind of the peak of the original Omicron wave. It's at 900,000 copies per gram. It begins to go down. And then in this kind of period where you can barely see it on that graph, so we blew it up there so you could see it a little better. The BA.2 variant, which is in the yellow, overtakes the BA.1 Omicron variant, which is in the red, and begins increasing and drives an increase there. LA, this newest wave has never gotten as high as the original Omicron wave. It's really quite specific to Northern California that this second Omicron wave has overtaken the first one. Go ahead. Yeah, so you guys are already sending us samples. So you get the collection kits, we mail them with all the return shipping and everything needed. And then you collect the sample and send it. I'm not sure actually if you're doing primary clarifier or influent, but either way, we're getting it and the data's on the website. So it's all working. Yeah, go ahead to the next slide.
So after this one, it's just how to sign up. So that's
great.
Pretty much the end since.
I want to just pull up Public Health. Do you want to just pull up the website and can show them where Half Moon Bay is on it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so you have this drop down. Find your particular site. Great, Half Moon Bay. Then you can do 30 days. And so the legends over there, what's BA2? We're now testing for this new variant, BA.4, which isn't super high yet, luckily. And so we started getting samples from you guys in late April, and those are the values. So it's been pretty steady since then. You can see kind of the value. Ali, you want to change it to Davis, and then we can go all the way back. And so Davis is one of the plants that we've been doing for a really long time, and we ported all the data onto here. So this, you can see there's the winter surge of 2020, and you get your Delta surge there in the summer of 2021. In August, you see there's a couple little peaks there. Then in January 2021, you get your Omicron surge, and then now you see they're in the midst of this BA.2 surge, which is huge. Like it's overtaken even the Omicron surge there in Davis. So over time, we get to see these trends, we get to understand what's going on, and we're testing not only for SARS-CoV-2, but we've now shown with publications that we can also track the number of people that have influenza and also respiratory syncytial virus, otherwise known as RSV, which is a really bad virus for infants and very young children and the elderly to get, although not so bad for people that are otherwise healthy. Still a very important virus for public health. And so we're testing for those, and those will also be added. We don't have them on the dashboard yet, but they'll be added up as soon as our software engineers can get those on. And so, yeah, that's the program. We have, right now, we have funding to run it through the end of 2023, so another 18 months from now. Our goal is to get, after that, is to run it into perpetuity. We think having these wastewater samples and being able to test them for viruses is going to prove really useful for public health officials. Will prove really useful if there's ever a time, let's hope not, but if there's ever a time in the future when we don't know if another virus that seems really bad has gotten to the US yet, we'll have all of these wastewater samples coming in from all over the country and be able to say, yes, no, it isn't here, it is here, here's where it's high, here's where like we should really start looking at this. I think it's really a really amazing public health tool, the ability to tell what's going on in so much of the country just by testing, 100, 200, 300 samples, whereas, clinicians are running millions of COVID tests at the height of the pandemic per day. So this is a really, I think, cool tool, and we're really happy you guys have been sending samples and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Brad?
Just real quick here. This seems like one of the most amazing programs I've ever seen. We have two TV broadcasters taping this. How do we tell the people that this is out there, and rather than go look at the SAM website? To me, this is super critical stuff. And I'd like to see more, I guess it's advertising of what this is to the public, saying, hey, look, people are taking COVID tests, they're doing this, they're taking that, it's not being reported. This is the best data we've got, period. Kishan?
Yes, I'd like to mention that there's no specific subscription or anything required. Anybody from the public can log into publichealth.verily.com and just choose the Dropbox from Half Moon Bay, which actually gives the indication of the levels in Half Moon Bay. And we continue to do the test, collecting the samples. We do it twice a week. So typically, once the samples are collected today, then within 48 hours, you get the latest results on the website. On this website, where you just log into publichealth.verily.com. No user ID, no password, nothing. Just log into that, and it's as easy as that.
Thank you.
Yeah, to the publicity aspect, we actually had an ABC reporter last week or 2 weeks ago come and film at the lab for like 3 hours. And then she also went to maybe it was Palo Alto wastewater treatment plant to see the upstream process. And I'm told that that is going to air, I believe, tomorrow. And they're trying to actually get it picked up by like the national ABC broadcast because they thought it was super interesting. So it's going to be like a 5 to 10 minute segment, I think, on the local ABC about like everything from collecting the sample at the treatment plant to how we do it in the lab to looking at the data. So hopefully that will get some more local interest in it.
Thanks.
So certainly this information is valuable on an individual level for you to assess your own risk. But are the public health officials, listening or, receiving data? And do you see that this might more actively inform policymaking regarding, public health directives and threat levels and that sort of thing?
Yeah, they are. So we've been working with, it depends on the county a little bit. Some of them, I guess we'll just say, are more interested than others in the data. So like Santa Clara public health officials we've been collaborating with them for almost 2 years now, and they're super interested in most of their addresses to the public. They'll talk about, hey, here's what the wastewater is showing. We know this is actually a really reliable indicator because it's not biased, because now everyone's taking antigen tests and not even reporting it to public health officials. So they have no idea how many people have COVID. So they're saying this is really the data they're looking at to try to predict these trends. And there's some really this might be getting a little deep, but there's some really interesting data in here. So like that orange line there is the BA.2 variant, and you can, we have the BA.1, it's just not graphed on here because it'll make the graph look too messy with too many lines on it. But we basically could see exactly when BA.2 started taking over from BA.1, and there are monoclonal antibody treatments that are effective against BA.1, but not effective against BA.2. And having this data that early on in the process to know what's happening informs public health officials to tell doctors, hey, if someone comes in and they have a severe case, you really need to figure out what variant they have or go with one of these monoclonal antibodies that treats the BA.2 variant, not BA.1. And that data gets to them weeks, our data, weeks before sequencing data of clinical specimens gets to them. And that's one of the more useful things. I think from like a, from a public policy and what they're going to do, the hands are a little bit tied at this point just because of pandemic fatigue and everything. But I think there's still things like that, knowing what treatment to give for the particular variant that's prominent that are useful with this data.
Well, I'm guessing it would give an early market signal too, in terms of, PPE, just-in-time production of vaccines, that sort of thing. So it has actually a commercial application as well, I would say.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So we know that with pharma companies that are also watching the data closely to know like what should they be preparing for with their treatment that they're doing or their vaccine or anything.
I see that Catherine has her hand raised.
Thank you. Let me put down the other one. Overhead. There we go. Keishan, I would love to see a press release. I see that Greg volunteered on the chat to write one for Coastside Buzz, but I would love to see us do one as well, because we're now working with this group and also with another group on testing wastewater. And I think it would be very useful for the public to know that their tax dollars are being used for, not tax dollars, sewer fees are being used for very interesting kinds of science that have a great benefit to the community on this. I think having been in advertising for a little while, the more times you tell people about something, the more likely they are to pay attention to it. And so if they read it in the paper, a lot of us don't watch ABC or NBC. So we might never have heard about it, but we do look at things in the review. And I would also mention, send it to the Pacifica Tribune. Because those folks would be, I'm sure, very interested in it too. I have a question. Can you also track antibody levels through wastewater, or has it not gotten that sophisticated?
No, we're not able to do that. No, it's just not shed in the waste. So you need from what we've seen, you need a blood sample to actually do that.
Oh, okay. Because I'm really curious when you start looking at all these graphs, what I'd like to see is as a percent of population have had any variant.
Yeah, I wish we could tell that from this data. But yeah, you need blood to actually do that. But I think, okay. Yeah, it's certainly an interesting thing to think about. Well,
I'm sure it's something that will, this is only the beginning of a very interesting data journey. So it will be fascinating to watch it.
Yeah, exactly. I think the super interesting thing is no one even knew this was possible until SARS-CoV-2 hit, and then people started trying. We started trying, and it was amazing how correlated it is with cases. And then we were able to show that it works for flu and it works for RSV, and who knows what other viruses or pathogens it might work for. So there's still more research to be done. It's early days, but it's very cool, I think.
Matt.
Thank you. I was just wondering, as Catherine just mentioned, this sounds like another program. Sam's been sending samples to a program, I believe is based in Massachusetts. I don't recall seeing Scan or Verily or Google mentioned in that one. So this is a second program, an additional one.
Yeah, I think that other company is BioBot in Massachusetts. So we differ.
Right.
We differ in One, we test the solids, they test the liquid. So that's a different aspect between the two programs. And as far as I know, I don't know if they test for flu and RSV and some of these other viruses that we test for as well. So those are the few of the main differences between the programs.
Yeah,
I think we should be happy to contribute to this program as well. And I think I heard someone say that this is where our sewer fees are going, but as I understand, like the BioBot system, this is entirely free for SAM.
Yeah, we certainly don't charge anything for the sample. I don't know. Yeah, so outside of the time it takes to collect the sample, I think that's the only cost, I guess, to you guys, as far as I know.
Kishan?
Yeah, to elaborate further on what Director Clark mentioned, we started off with BioBot. At that point of time, Verily was not yet ready. And the ones which are being tested at BioBot, that's one in the East Coast, is actually on a paid basis. So we are slowly tapering it off because everything is being captured by Verily, and it's no charge for us to do it at Verily. So we will be continuing the BioBot till such time that we run out of the bottles. That will probably be another 3 or 4 samples, and then it'll be only Verily from onwards. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess that's a wrap unless anybody has any more questions. I really appreciate Verily coming and making a presentation. Very educational. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Ali. Okay.
Thank you.
So we're moving on to item 4B, authorize the general manager to issue a purchase order to G3 for the purchase of replacement pump at Portola Pump Station in the amount of $65,452.
So the Portola Pump Station has got 4 pumps, 1 small pump and 3 large pumps. Sometime, I think it was last year or the early part of last year, the board authorized for replacement of 2 of the large pumps. We've got those pumps procured. They're in the process of installing. So that leaves us with replacing 1 small pump and 1 large pump. And therefore, at this point in today's meeting, we brought the item of replacing the small pump, which has been authorized in our present budget of this fiscal year. And this small pump is actually a workhorse. We use the small pump all the time. We use the large pump only when there's large flows, when there's heavy rain, storm events, or anything like that. Otherwise, pretty much the small pump is being used most of the time. So this item is being brought to the board. We are replacing the pumps, the same pump in kind, the same pump belonging to the Grundfos Yeomans model, which is existing. And that is being replaced with the pump, which was probably installed way back in the 90s. But of course, this pump, which is being replaced, has got the same pipe connections, the suction and the discharge. There's no change. But the material and other things have been upgraded to the present technology requirements. And staff is here to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? Catherine.
Thank you. We had a little over a year ago a consultant present to the board the idea of changing the pumps out. And I think the board and staff decided to keep the system we've got and upgrade it into modern technology, but staying with the existing dynamics of the system. Do you know offhand, or could you look into that, how much money Sam saved by not going along with that particular analysis? As I recall, it was quite a bit of money.
Yep, I don't have it off the top of my head, but that was being considered in lieu of the wet weather storage expansion that we were considering.
That's right. I would appreciate it for the public and the board if it wouldn't take too long just to do a quick back of the napkin, back of the envelope kind of comparison. I'm not looking for I'm not looking for cents. I'm not even looking for dollars. I'm looking like for $10 or $20,000 increments. Because as I recall, there was quite a bit of savings in what we decided to do. And that included the operations as well and the maintenance. If it is too much trouble, I can maybe go back through my badly organized, well, stored, not organized papers. So I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
Matthew?
Thank you. I noticed in the document from G3 Engineering that the quoted price here does not include installation, startup, or taxes, and it was unclear to me whether it included shipping. So my questions are, I would really like to know what the full cost of things are before we vote to start them. Sometimes they turn out to be twice as much as the initial figure. And so are those figures not available? Why don't we get the how much installation and shipping, et cetera, is going to cost? And my other question is how it's allocated in the budget already. How's that done if you don't have the final figure?
I don't have the final figure because at the time of the budget, it's an estimate. So we have a project cost. And right now we do not have the cost for the installation because the delivery time for the pump itself is about 6 months. You see 24 to 26 weeks. So within 6 months, a lot of things can change. I cannot finalize a contractor for installation so many months in advance to give a commitment for something which he will be installing once the pump arrives. So that's why at this point of time, authorization is required only to procure the pumps. And at a later stage, we would bring back the installation depending upon how the cost is, bring it back to the board for approval. That's the way normally we do that for such contracts for such projects which take a lot of time.
I understand. Okay, thanks. So
in
G3
Half
doesn't do
Bay,
the installation. They're only the manufacturers.
The manufacturer has another contractor who could help us with the installation, but not necessarily that we would go with them. At that point of time, we would send out bids and possibly choose the best contractor who can help us with the installation.
Oh, good. Thank you.
so budget items are engineers' estimates. So yeah, they're refined later. Any other questions?
Well, and taxes are 10%. So that's kind of just a given is we're going to pay 10% in taxes unless they go up again. Shipping is getting to be scary. You're right, Matthew. But we certainly can't send a staff person and a semi to pick these things up. So we're kind of stuck with shipping. Sorry.
Do we have a motion and a second to approve?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
Could I have a roll call, please?
Director Dye? You're muted, Director Dye.
Yes.
Director Lohman?
Yes.
Director Clark?
Aye.
Director Radback?
Yes.
Director Slater-Carter?
Yes.
Chair Radek?
Yes.
Thank you.
And we're moving on to item 4C, authorize general manager to issue a purchase order to Calcon Systems for the purchase of motor operated valves in the amount of $48,100.
Yeah. So these are the motor operated valves which are required when we operate both the aeration basins. Right now we have only one aeration basin, which is aeration basin 3. And last year in the month of August, the board authorized for purchase of diffusers and other related equipments for getting the aeration basin 4 up and running. So when we have aeration basin 3 and 4 running, we would need to balance the dissolved oxygen concentration in such a way that it is uniform in both the aeration basins. The dissolved oxygen concentration is basically required to sustain the population of all the microorganisms in the aeration basin. So this is only possible by means of motor operated valves. We have these valves operated by electric actuators, which has controls, and these can be programmed to the required dissolved oxygen content, and they would either open or close the valve to let in more air or to let out more air. And therefore, a balance can be made between to ensure that both the aeration basins have the same dissolved oxygen concentration. And therefore, this item has been brought to the board for authorization to purchase two motor operated valves for this aeration basin project. Staff is here to answer any questions.
Barbara?
Yes, I voted for getting Basin 4 going, and I know we've already voted on one patch. I understand completely that not all of the equipment can be purchased at once, getting this Basin 4 going. Will you give us sort of, along the lines of Matthew's question, just how much the costs of getting Basin 4 going are as we go forward? Will you give us, an ongoing cost of that item?
Yeah, that is actually there in the at the second meeting of the month. I present a CIP spreadsheet, and that has got a complete cost as of date. It gives you, as the project is progressing, it gives you what costs are incurred for that particular project.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'd entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
Director Dye,
Aye.
Director Lohman,
Yes.
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Radback,
Yes.
Director Slater-Carter. Director Slater-Carter, you're muted.
Yes, yes.
Chair Rada.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item D, approve Fifth Amendment and extension of collection system contract between SAM and the city of Half Moon Bay through June 30, 2023.
As you're aware, we have a contract between SAM and the city of Half Moon Bay. And the last time the contract amendment was done last year, and that is valid until June 30th of this year. And therefore, this contract amendment has been brought to the board. There are no changes in the contract except for the contract price, which is already approved in the collections budget. It's the same thing. There are 3 lift stations in Half Moon Bay, and SAM services all these 3 lift stations. We maintain those 3 lift stations as once a week, we go ahead and do all the cleaning and maintain the lift stations. Besides, of course, we also do the flushing of the lines belonging to Half Moon Bay. So the contract language is the same as last year. There's absolutely no change except for the dollar amount, which I mentioned, which was approved in the collections budget. So this is the 5th amendment, which is brought to the board for approval. This has already been approved by the Half Moon Bay Council and being brought to the SAM board for accepting. Staff is here to answer any questions.
Rick?
I don't, my memory is fading. So my question is procedure. Do we have to approve the Half Moon Bay contract? Do they approve our contracts? Is it a SAM contract? I'm not sure why we're involved with Half Moon Bay on this. Just a procedure question.
Yeah, if I may answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we entered into a contract a couple of years back, about 4 years back, when Half Moon Bay went out for an RFP. And since then, SAM is on a contract with Half Moon Bay. And therefore, the same contract has been being amended every year. So the original contract was awarded to SAM after an RFP was received. I think there were more than one contractor besides SAM, and SAM was chosen to be awarded. So this is just a renewal of those contracts. Does that answer your question, Director Long?
Why are we involved with Half Moon Bay's decisions and, contracts, and is it between Half Moon Bay and the union?
Sam performs the work.
Okay, I understand that.
So SAM is a contractor to Half Moon Bay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess we're voting as SAM board members to approve this contract.
Keishan, could you explain to Rick the difference between Montera and Granada have an ongoing agreement? Half Moon Bays needs to be renewed every year.
Yes,
And that's what the difference is.
correct. As for the JPA, Montera and GCSD are part of the JPA for the collections contract, while Half Moon Bay decided to opt out way back in, I think, 2017 or 2016 and go out for a separate contract.
Okay. That more than answers my question, so thank you.
Each have a contract with SAM for collections?
Come again?
Doesn't each agency have a contract with SAM for collections?
No, it's just a budget.
Huh.
We don't have a contract. It's a part of the JPA. So the language is in the JPA, but not a detailed contract like this, because this was a separate RFP, which was sent out by Half Moon Bay, and we went through that agreement at that point of time.
There were discussions at that point in time about having separate contracts for each of the member agencies, but the member agencies decided we were comfortable with the level of service. We liked the way things were going, and we didn't need to involve our attorneys in drafting yet another contract and having to renew it every year. And things appear to be working.
Thank you.
So we must have, I'm sorry, I should know this, but I'm afraid I don't. But we have an agreement that has specifics and so forth of what we expect. I've seen it. I mean, I know what we expect, and it works really well. So in essence, we have just a less formal contract. Would that be a way to look at it? We have a agreement that has details of what's going to be done and how often and all of those things. It's not as if we still have specifications and so forth of what SAM is going to do for our lines, right?
Yeah, that's a part of the JPA. Whatever we have, language which was drafted many years back, that's the same thing. We don't have anything specific for each member agency giving details about what lines to be cleaned and how many lines and all that stuff. That's an arrangement with SAM and the member agency. They give us at the beginning of the year what needs to be cleaned, or on a monthly basis agree to what is schedules sent out by SAM.
And we wanted, a different sort of menu, if you will. So we did it by contract.
Yeah.
May I just quickly, JPAs, obviously these often are decades old and, they get drafted originally, and it is an agreement, the contract that all these different agencies agree to, and they outline the variety of services that this JPA will provide, right? Often, obviously in this case, sewer services and sewer related services. This particular contract or agreement, as our general manager stated, was a specific RFP for a specific type of work that Half Moon Bay was specifically looking for, and SAM responded and is now essentially the consultant or contractor for that specific work. And now it's at the 5th extension that you are looking at. So while we do have that general agreement, there may be additional work that may be a little bit outside the scope or is not generally agreed upon by the entire JPA that individual member agencies might want, and that is what we are approving to extend tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ty. If there are no other questions, could we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Director Dye,
Yes.
Director Loman,
Yes.
Director Clark,
Aye.
Director Radback,
Yes.
Director Slater Carter,
Yes.
Chair Rada.
Yes,
Thank you. Motion
thank
approved.
you. I'm guessing we don't have a general manager's report until the second meeting?
That's right.
Okay. An attorney's report. Ty, do you have anything?
Nothing, just really glad to be here with you all today, and hopefully I'll be back.
Good to see you. Director's reports, any? Okay. Topics for future board consideration. I actually have one. So the agenda item, and it need not be like next meeting or even in July, because it bears further discussion, I think, potentially by the strategic planning committee and perhaps the general agency managers, is so that my understanding is that the general managers have been discussing proposed approaches to the electrical system. And my understanding is that the conversation ended up devolving around, well, you know, what we have here is not really a sea level rise study, and that we really should be, before deciding on approach relating to the electrical system, like building a new building and that sort of thing, that we, you know, should proceed to go further in depth on a vulnerability assessment for the plant, both from creek flooding and sea level rise and groundwater. So I would just like, for the purposes of moving the discussion forward, get on a future agenda a sea level rise study that will look at both flooding and groundwater and sea level rise. And I'm guessing more discussions are going to be happening with Kishan and the general managers and ultimately the board. But I want to, you know, this needs to, we can't just let this go, because these projects take a long time. We want to start the planning, and we want to review what we've gotten about the system. We want to review vulnerability assessments provided by the county, but we're going to have to, you know, go deeper and look at a variety of things. So I'd like to get that on a future agenda. Maybe maybe we could say August for now, while we engage further discussions with the strategic planning group and the general managers.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
Anybody else? Rick?
I just read an article on the Antarctic, and another big chunk is scheduled to fall at some point, and the estimate is it will raise sea levels by 10 feet. So this could be more urgent than we think.
Exactly. So, you know, I heard that there was a lot of questions about, well, maybe we should be looking at something a little more comprehensive than just making a decision now on the electrical, especially with the budget considerations. And I just said, well, we've got to move something along. You know, maybe we need a new scope of work, but we got to figure out what that is. So that's what we want to pursue. And Rick was completely right. You know, sea level rise happen precipitously and catastrophically with either Greenland or the, you know, South Antarctic, West Antarctic ice sheet calving and you know, causing.
Well, I would say we also need, and this was a request I made of the strategic plan committee, and that was to look at a non-centralized, more distributed SAM plant operation. And I would like to see that ongoing as part of the discussion. If we're talking about a 10-foot level, 10-foot rise in sea level, it might make it worthwhile then to be looking at, instead of rebuilding an entire plant in a geodesic dome at a low level, go with smaller plants that can do some scalping and then send what needs to be further treated down to a higher location somewhere on the coast.
Well, I'm guessing, scenario planning would be part of any study that comes, out of this process. It's like we build levees, berms. Do we set it back? Do we just go to a distributed system? But what we have to do is get going. And right now we have a coastal engineer about to, present an administrative draft of the assessment of the area of the Ritz-Carlton. And he's a very, well-known coastal engineer. We may, be able to enlist him to at least develop a scope of work, if, not necessarily to award a contract, but to develop a scope of work that we would all give input to before releasing, an RFP or an RFQ. So one project done, we might be able to, have our consultants develop a scope of work based on what we think, should be looked at. So the sooner we move on this, the better. But I agree, looking at the distributed system ought to be one scenario evaluated. So anyway, I'd like to move forward on this.
Sure.
All right. Any other agenda items, future agenda items? So are there any closed session items?
No, not that I can think of. I don't think there's anything else from your side, right? No.
Nothing for me.
All right, well then we can adjourn this meeting for this evening.
Hey,
Thanks,
Good
everybody.
night, everybody.
thank you very much.
Soon. Thank you, Ty. Nice to meet you.
Yes, thank you, Ty.
Good night, y'all.
Good night.